The lamp on Wren Calder's porch threw a small coin of light into a night wide as a prairie ocean. Somewhere beyond the yucca, a coyote stitched the darkness with a thin, sorrowing cry. The first hoofbeat came soft and solitary, like a thought a man tries not to think. Then another. Then the figure emerged, hat brim low, coat dusty as the road, shadow walking before him like a second rider. He tied off his mare as if he were tacking his name to the post. "Water?" he asked. Wren lifted the lamp. The gold circle found his face older than 30, younger than forever, carved by weather and wanting. "Buckets there," she said. "2 bits for the horse, a nickel for the man if he's polite." He tipped the hat. "Then it's a nickel night." While the horse drank, she studied the stranger. Soles worn thin, coat hem frayed into fringe, not meant for fashion. The smell of mesquite, smoke and distance. A man who'd run from something and kept running after it fell behind. "You got rooms?" he asked. "1 room. Door doesn't lock." "Not that locks matter." He gave Wren a small smile, like a secret he didn't plan to spend. "Most locks only keep out men who weren't coming anyway." Inside, the waystation's single room offered a stove, 2 cots, a table that wobbled with opinions, and a Bible with a cracked spine. Wren swung the kettle. The flame answered with a low blue tongue. She poured him coffee as dark as the window. "What do folks call you?" she asked. He looked at the steam like a man reading his future in it. "Call me Boone," he said at last. "Malachi, if you like your syllables long." "Wren," she said. "Like the bird." "I figured." His eyes moved to the mantel, to a framed daguerreotype of a young man in a suit too stiff for him. The glass had a hairline crack that split the man's smile. Boone's gaze quieted. "Your husband." "Was," Wren said. The word fell like a coin down a well. "He worked freight. Storm took him on the Cimarron." "That was 2 springs ago." Boone nodded. The way men nod at weather they can't fix. They ate by the stove biscuits hard as law, and a stew that tasted of time and trying. Boone spoke little, but his silences weren't hollow. They were the kind built to hold something. When he did speak, it was in a dry, measured cadence that made facts sound like verdicts. "You're not the first rider tonight," Wren said, eyes still on the pot. "Man before you didn't come for food." Boone's spoon paused. "What did he come for?" "Names," she said. "He asked after a drifter with a scar like a comma at the mouth. Said the man broke a bank in Abilene without raising his voice. Said he didn't kill nobody, just took the money and left a note that read, 'Debt settled.' He had a poster rolled in his pocket, kept it folded, like he didn't want the paper to see the light." "Bounty man?" Boone asked. Wren nodded. "Or one of those deputies from nowhere that sprout up after a robbery like thornweed after rain. He didn't drink. He didn't smile. He looked at my picture." Her hand lifted, then dropped, and asked if my dead man ever rode with Malachi Boone. Boone's spoon set itself down with a careful click. The pot simmered, the lamp hummed, the night listened through the boards. "What did you tell him?" Boone asked. "I told him my dead man never rode with anyone but me." She met his eyes. He left a question hanging on the porch. I swept it off with the dust. Boone's mouth tugged at that comma of a scar. "Kind of you." "Kindness is cheaper than trouble," Wren said. He took the last of the coffee, then thumbed a ring in the table where heat had once set a cup down too hard for the wood to forget. "You keep this place alone?" "Not alone," she said. "Redbird 2 Moons camps by the arroyo. Says the land sleeps here without nightmares. Sister Mercy rides through twice a week with a mule that knows scripture by heart. Otis Lark brings the wire's gossip whenever he runs dry of company. Alone is a word towns invent so they can feel crowded." Boone grunted something like a laugh. "You speak like a preacher." "I speak like a widow," Wren said. The wind came up outside, brushing the house with a dry hand. Somewhere in that wind a hinge gave a restless little whine. Boone stood, walked to the door, and opened it to the hard starlight. He spent a long minute tasting the night, like a man tasting a lie. "You expecting anyone?" he asked. "No," Wren said. "But trouble doesn't right ahead." Boone stepped out and let the darkness swallow him to the shoulders. He crouched by the stoop, pressed 2 fingers into the dust. When he came back, a thin rim of dirt traced his knuckles. "4 horses," he said. "Shod. Fresh. 1 spent." They didn't stop long. Wren's throat tightened. The man who asked for names rode alone. This ain't the same man. In the silence that followed, the kettle breathed. Boone set his hat back on, brim low. Something in him seemed to settle like silt in water. "I won't ask your secret," he said, "but I'll tell you mine. The law's hunting me for a debt, not all mine. I never took pleasure in a job, and I never left a widow by my own choosing. If a badge comes to your door with my name on its tongue, I'll be the one to answer." Wren's eyes flared, then softened. She reached for the mantle, touched the cracked glass where her husband's smile was caught forever, in a spring that never happened. "A widow is a house with a door that swings in the wind," she said. "The men who hunt you, will they slam it shut?" "They'll try." She lifted the lamp, brightening the room as if that could move danger back 1 more step. "Then I'll take you a room," she said. "And I'll take your word." Boone didn't move. "That's a heavy purchase, Wren Calder. Everything worth buying is." He nodded once. Something like a vow crossed his face, a cloud shadow over a mesa. "I'll keep your place safe while I'm under it," he said. "Whatever comes riding, I'll meet it in the yard before it learns your name." The words were plain, but they changed the shape of the air. Wren felt it. A new spine in the house, a new line in the sand. She exhaled as if she had been holding breath since the river took her husband. Outside, the wind faded. The night resumed its slow, indifferent breathing. Then a far-off thunder without storm. Hooves, many. The sound climbed the road in a ragged march. Wren set the lamp down and pinched the wick to a soft glow. Boone went to the window. The glass held the moon like a coin and threw back his eyes. In the silver distance, a string of riders unbuttoned themselves from the horizon. At their head, a tall figure rocked easy in the saddle. Coat flared like a raven's wing. The starlight found metal on his chest. Not a star, no. A cross pinned where a badge might be, catching moon and throwing it like a sermon. "Silas Yarrow," Boone murmured, and the name tasted of iron. "Deputy now. Still talking like Sundays." "You know him?" Wren asked. "He knows everyone he decides is guilty," Boone said. The riders slowed at the gate. The tall man raised a hand. They fanned out like cards in a gambler's flourish. Boots hit dirt. Spurs gave the night a cold little song. A voice rose, calm, clean, as if it had washed before speaking. "House," the voice called. "By order of the territory, we seek Malachi Boone for questions of debt and blood. We come polite. Open the door and the Lord may keep this easy." Wren looked at Boone. The lamp made a small sun of her eyes. He pulled the pistol he had not once glanced at, a black length of promise, and set it quietly on the table between them. "I gave you my vow," he said. "And I bought it," she answered. The voice outside spoke again, closer now, almost tender. "Widow Calder," it called, using a name Boone had not given. "Let us in, and you'll be done with fear before the coffee cools." Wren's hand found the mantle, crackled glass, trapped spring. She drew breath to answer, and from the dark behind the lawmen, another figure appeared. Dirty coat, slouch hat, grin full of bad roads. He carried no badge. He carried a rolled poster. Jonah Pike turned his head toward the window as if he felt Boone's eyes, and smiled the smile of a man who has finally caught up to his grievance. "Evening, Malachi," Jonah called softly. "Tell the widow how much your life is worth to me." The lamp guttered. The house held its breath. Boone lifted his eyes from the gun to Wren's face, and the night leaned in to hear which vow would break first. The night clung close to the walls of Wren Calder's waystation, and the riders outside pressed their silence like palms against the wood. Malachi Boone stood in the half-light, his hand resting on the pistol but not yet owning it. He'd faced posses before, but never with a widow watching like a jury of one. Deputy Silas Yarrow's voice carried across the yard again measured, even, never raising itself above reason. Boone, you've dragged your shadow from Kansas to the desert. But the desert knows no shadows, only truth. Step out, and I'll weigh your sins against your silence. Boone said nothing. The lawman's words rolled over him like scripture carved into stone he didn't plan to read. Jonah Pike shifted in the dust, the bounty man's grin sharp as glass. Don't make him preach all night, Boone. You step out, and I'll be sure they keep you breathing long enough to settle what you owe me. He shook the rolled poster loose, paper cracking in the dry air. Boone's face stared back, ink and accusation, scar drawn too heavy like it was carved into sin itself. Wren whispered, "They know your name. They know mine. If they step inside, I'll be standing between fire and tinder." Boone lowered his hat brim, eyes shadowed. "You'll stand nowhere near. I carry this weight." Her jaw set. A widow doesn't get to choose who carries what, not when the law comes speaking her name. Through the glass, Sister Mercy's mule clopped faint down the road, lantern bobbing like a low star. She hadn't seen the gathered men yet. Boone cursed inwardly. A nun with scripture and a soft heart was tinder of another kind. "Stay quiet," he told Wren, sliding to the door. He cracked it open enough to breathe the night. "Deputy Yarrow," he called, his voice as flat as the horizon. "I've no quarrel with the territory, and I spilled no blood in Abilene. That debt was mine alone to carry, and it's already settled." The deputy stepped forward, long coat brushing his boots. "Debts don't die with ink on a note. They die when the law says they're buried." Jonah Pike's laugh rattled low. "Hear that? Even scripture's on my side." Wren's fingers pressed the cracked frame of her husband's photo until her skin whitened. Boone saw it, felt it, and it nailed his vow deeper into his chest. "I'll meet you outside," Boone called. "But not with your crowd. One man against one man, the way the desert keeps score." The deputy shook his head slow, deliberate. "The desert may be blind, but the law sees all." His hand brushed the cross pinned to his chest. "Step out, and we'll test the mercy of the territory." Behind him, Jonah Pike's grin never bent. He leaned toward the posse, voice carrying just enough. "If he don't step out, I'll light the place myself. Let's see how a widow's scream tastes on the wind." The words hit Wren like a nail through timber. Boone's scar twitched. The pistol found his palm like it was always meant to live there. He pushed the door wider, and starlight painted the iron in his hand. "No fire," Boone said, voice flat as stone. "You throw flame here, you burn with it." The posse shifted, boots stirring dust, hands brushing leather. The air cracked tight, stretched thin as wire. Then, from the dark arroyo, another voice cut clean through the standoff. "4 riders south," it said. Redbird Two Moons emerged, bow in hand, his eyes calm and knowing. "They circle like wolves. More law comes." Deputy Yarrow didn't flinch, but his men shifted. Jonah Pike's grin widened, wolfish. Boone's gut tightened. The noose wasn't only at the front, it was closing on every side. Wren stepped forward, her voice steady though her hand trembled. "Then the desert's about to learn how many secrets a widow's house can hold." The words hung like a bell note. Inside, the lamp flickered. Outside, spurs rang as men braced for the first move. Boone felt the weight of 2 vows, one sworn to himself, one sworn to her, and knew one of them was bound to break before the sun rose. And as the silence cracked wide enough for the first shot to fall, the mule's lantern swung into the yard, Sister Mercy's voice cutting through the dust. "Men of God, lower your guns." The yard froze. Boone's jaw tightened. This was no salvation. This was the spark that might set the whole desert alight. Sister Mercy Delaney rode into the yard as if she carried daylight on her mule's saddle. The lantern swung, scattering gold across gunmetal and shadowed faces. Her habit was worn, dust-streaked, and her voice carried the calm of Riverstone. "Brothers," she said, lifting her hand, "this land is thirsty enough without blood to salt it." The posse shifted. Deputy Silas Yarrow's jaw clenched, the cross on his chest glinting like judgment. Jonah Pike only grinned wider, wolf eyes glowing in the lamplight. "Step aside, sister," Yarrow said. "Your hymns don't bind a wanted man." Mercy slid down from her mule, boots sinking into the dust with no hurry at all. She walked past armed men as if their guns were nothing but weather. "I know Malachi Boone," she said. "I know the lives he's taken none. I know the bread he's shared with orphans at my mission. I know the vow he carries heavier than any chain." Her eyes cut to Boone, then Wren. "The widow has chosen to shelter him. That makes her vow part of his." Jonah Pike spat in the dust. "That's a fine sermon, sister, but sermons don't hang bounties." He snapped the wanted poster open, Boone's face leering in ink. $500 says your outlaw's worth more dead than he ever was alive." Boone stepped forward, pistol low but steady. "Jonah," he said, his voice iron wrapped in leather, "you've been chasing me since Missouri. You want your pound of flesh, fine, but leave the widow out of it." Pike's grin thinned into something sharper. "Boone, the only reason I keep you breathing is so she can watch me take what you swore you'd protect. That's worth more than gold." Wren's breath caught sharp, but her voice was iron. "You'll not touch a stone in this house. My husband's grave taught me one lesson: what you bury stays buried, and what you steal never stays yours." The posse muttered, restless, the air thick with the smell of sweat and tension. Yarrow raised his hand, silencing them like a preacher quieting a flock. "Sister Mercy, step back. Widow Calder, this is not your quarrel. Malachi Boone belongs to the law." Boone's scar twisted. "The law belongs to men who hide behind it." That was the match. One of Yarrow's men twitched, hand grazing iron. Redbird Two Moon's bowstring sang an arrow thunked into the dirt between the deputy's boots. A warning. Every weapon lifted in a single breath. Wren moved before Boone could stop her. She stepped into the doorway, hands raised, voice slicing the chaos. "If you spill blood here, it'll be on the widow's floor, and no man here will leave this yard without the desert carrying his name in whispers." The silence was a taut rope, stretched to snapping. Jonah Pike's laugh broke it. Harsh. Cold. "Hear that, boys? The widow's got more sand than half of you." His pistol flashed aim not at Boone, but at the lamp in Wren's hand. The shot cracked, glass shattered, flame hissed out, and darkness swallowed the yard. Horses screamed. Men cursed. The desert itself seemed to rear back. Boone grabbed Wren, dragging her behind the doorframe as bullets carved sparks from the wall. Redbird loosed another arrow. A man cried out. Sister Mercy dropped flat, her mule braying wild. In the chaos, Boone's vow burned hotter than any flame. Protect the widow, no matter the cost. But in the dark, he heard Yarrow's voice, calm and near. "Malachi Boone, you cannot guard her from judgment. When the dawn comes, she'll curse the day she opened her door." And then, silence again, men shifting back, hoofbeats receding. The posse pulled away like a tide, but Boone knew tides only drew back to gather strength. Inside, Wren lit a fresh match with shaking hands. Her eyes met Boone's, fierce through the tremor. "They'll be back." Boone holstered his gun. "Then so will I." The match hissed down, flame eating closer. Wren's voice steadied. "Your vow's the only thing between me and the dust." Boone took the match from her fingers and pinched it out. In the sudden dark, his words felt carved in stone. "Then I'll keep it till the desert itself runs out of breath." If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. When morning bled into the desert, the waystation stood half-burned in silence. Not by flame Jonah Pike's bullet had snuffed the lamp before it spread, but by the memory of fire that never came. The boards still carried the echo of gunshots. the wind whispering through fresh scars in the wood. Boone stepped out onto the porch, hat low, eyes raking the horizon. The posse had withdrawn into the hills, but he knew Yarrow's kind. They'd wait, starve him out, and let the desert grind his will to dust. Inside, Wren Calder was already at the stove, coaxing weak flames into heat. Her hands moved steady, but her shoulders bore the weight of a night that hadn't ended. "They'll circle back," she said, not looking at him. Boone nodded. "Men like Yarrow don't quit till they've nailed the sermon shut." She set a pot down hard. "And men like you don't quit till they've carried someone else's burden." Boone didn't answer. He had no words to trade for the truth of it. Redbird Two Moons entered quietly, like a shadow invited in. His bow hung unstrung over his shoulder, but his eyes held the same tautness as the night before. "4 camps," he said. "1 east, 1 west, 2 south. They wait for hunger." Boone muttered, "They'll get hunger before I do." Redbird shook his head. "Not hunger of the belly, hunger of the soul. Men like Yarrow wait until your vow cracks." His gaze shifted to Wren, who busied herself with spoons and silence. "They'll push through her." The words stung Boone sharper than iron. Before he could reply, Otis Lark stumbled through the doorway, his wiry frame buzzing with sweat and dust. The telegrapher's spectacles caught the firelight. "Boone," he wheezed, "the wire's alive with your name. They've painted you blacker than midnight. Territory wants you breathing, but Pike wants you broken. He's been spreading tales, says you left a trail of widows from Missouri to Abilene." Boone's scar twitched. Lies had teeth when spoken often enough. Wren turned, eyes flashing. "And the territory listens to bounty gossip like it's gospel?" Otis swallowed. "Ain't about truth. It's about stories folks believe. And right now, they believe Boone's the wolf at every door." Boone leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "Then I'll meet them like a wolf." Wren shook her head, voice hard. "You'll meet them like a man. A vow doesn't hide behind teeth. It stands on 2 feet and faces what's coming." Her words struck him deeper than bullets. Outside, a church bell rang from the far-off mission. Boone stiffened. "Sister Mercy." Redbird's eyes narrowed. "They ride for her. Break her first, then break you." Wren's hands went still on the pot. "She walked into that yard to shield you, and now they'll bleed her for it." Boone's hand went to his pistol, a reflex more than thought. His vow to protect Wren coiled tight around his ribs, but mercy had stood for him too, and the desert had no mercy for voices raised against the law. He looked at Wren. Her eyes were dark, steady, searching his face for the choice he feared to make. "Boone," she said softly, "if you leave, you'll carry her blood. If you stay, you'll carry mine." The sun climbed higher, baking the horizon in gold fire. Boone's scar tugged as if it too had to choose. Then, from the south, hoofbeats cracked the morning silence, dozens, maybe more. A dust cloud rose like smoke. Boone tightened his belt, jaw set. "The law's not waiting any more." Wren stepped beside him, her voice a thread of steel. "Then neither do we." The first riders crested the ridge, sunlight blazing off badges and rifles. And in that blinding glare, Boone knew the vow he'd sworn was about to be tested in the open yard, where the desert itself would weigh his soul. The riders came down the ridge like a slow tide, dust curling from their hooves. Deputy Silas Yarrow rode at the front, coat black as judgment, his silver cross catching sunlight like fire. Behind him, Jonah Pike loped in the saddle with that grin that could curdle milk. Wren stood at Boone's side on the porch, her face pale but her jaw unshaken. Redbird Two Moons crouched by the fence line, eyes narrowed, bowstring already kissed by fingers. Otis Lark hovered inside, wringing his hands around a telegraph key he'd carried with him like a talisman. Yarrow reined in just short of the gate. His voice rolled across the yard, calm and heavy. "Boone, I've given you 1 night's grace. The sun don't set twice on mercy. Step forward, surrender, and the widow keeps her roof." Jonah Pike leaned in his saddle. "Or step back, and I burn it for her." Boone's pistol gleamed in the light, though he hadn't raised it. His eyes never left Yarrow's. "You preach law like scripture, but the desert don't write verses for men like you." The deputy's hand slid to his holster, fingers resting with a preacher's patience. "The desert doesn't forgive, Boone. Neither do I." Wren's voice broke the standstill. "If you take him, you take me. My husband's grave doesn't hold my loyalty, it's alive, and standing here." Yarrow's gaze shifted to her, steady as a blade. "Widow Calder, no vow binds you to an outlaw." But her shoulders straightened. "A vow binds itself. I don't break what I've chosen." The men behind Yarrow muttered, restless, like a congregation unsure of their hymn. Boone felt the weight of it, a seesaw between law and loyalty. Then Jonah Pike laughed, a sound sharp as spurs on stone. "Let her talk. Words don't stop bullets. Boone knows it. That scar on his face is a sermon in itself. Every promise he makes comes back broken." Boone's scar twitched, but his voice came quiet. "Not this one." In the silence that followed, the desert breathed hot against them. Yarrow's hand tightened on the cross pinned to his chest. "So be it." He drew, fast as lightning, but Redbird's arrow sang quicker, slicing the deputy's hat clean from his head before a bullet left the chamber. Dust leapt where it landed. The posse stirred like startled cattle, hands half drawn, half afraid. Wren's heart hammered loud enough for Boone to hear. He stepped off the porch, gun loose in his hand, his vow carried in every stride. "You want me? Leave her out of it. I'll walk your road, Yarrow." "But only if she's untouched," Jonah Pike sneered. "You think your word buys anything here?" Boone leveled his pistol at Pike, calm as the sky. "It buys yours." The bounty man froze, grin slipping for the first time. The posse waited, caught between sermon and showdown. Then from the hills came a fresh echo, another set of riders, smaller, faster. A flag of dust trailed them, the glint of rifles catching Sunday. Yarrow's men twisted in their saddles, uneasy. Otis Lark whispered from the doorway, "Not the law, not Pike's men, someone else." Boone narrowed his eyes at the rising cloud. In the desert, more riders never meant salvation, only another page of judgment. The first figure crested the ridge, rifle raised high, voice carrying across the yard like thunder. "Malachi Boone belongs to no man's gallows but mine." The yard held its breath. Even the horses trembled, sensing the ground shift beneath the vows spoken there. The new riders thundered down the slope, lean men in dust-choked coats, rifles flashing. At their head rode a figure. Boone recognized at once Marshal Ephraim Cutter, a man once sworn to the law, now carrying his badge like a rusted nail in his pocket. His face was a canyon cut deep by betrayal, and his voice cracked like a whip. "Boone," Cutter shouted, "I buried brothers because of you. Today I collect." Yarrow's posse scattered, some turning rifles toward the marshal, others holding back in confusion. The yard had turned to quicksand, no one sure whose boots would sink first. Jonah Pike laughed like the chaos was a song written just for him. "Well, ain't this a blessed mess? 3 flocks, 1 lamb." Boone's pistol shifted between Pike, Yarrow, and Cutter, his vows straining like rawhide pulled taut. He could not protect Wren from 3 storms at once. Wren stepped forward, her voice steel under the rising din. "Enough! This house is no man's gallows. If you want Boone, you'll tear him from my hands, and the desert itself will curse you for it." The words stilled even the horses. Cutter's gaze flicked to Wren, hard but touched by something human. Yarrow, however, raised his cross like a weapon. "Widow Calder," he said, "you bind yourself to sin. Step aside, or fall with him." Boone's scar bent as he spoke low, for her ears alone. "Stay inside," but Wren shook her head. "A vow isn't kept in shadows." The yard cracked open. Cutter fired first, his shot grazing Yarrow's shoulder, spinning the deputy's coat red. Yarrow's men answered, bullets slicing air. Redbird loosed 2 arrows before dropping behind the fence. Jonah Pike fired wild, laughing, driving his horse straight through the crossfire. Boone dragged Wren against the porch beam as wood splintered around them. Otis Lark ducked inside, fumbling with his telegraph key, muttering, "The wire's gotta know. The world's gotta know." Sister Mercy's mule shrieked and bolted, the nun herself clutching her cross and shouting prayers against the storm. Boone leaned out, returning fire, every shot precise as a tolling bell. A rider screamed and fell. The smell of gunpowder rolled thick as smoke. Through it all, Yarrow's voice rose above the chaos, steady even as blood soaked his sleeve. "Boone, you can't shield her. Judgment comes like dawn, it cannot be stopped." Boone answered with his vow, words carved from grit. "Then I'll stand where dawn breaks." He emptied his pistol, smoke wreathing his face, then dragged Wren back inside as Cutter's men fanned wider. The house shuddered with impact, bullets hammering, wood cracking. Redbird vaulted through the window, breathing hard. "We hold for now, but they'll burn you out before night." Wren's hands shook as she reloaded Boone's revolver, the shells clinking like church bells. She pressed it back to him, eyes fierce. "If they come through that door, Boone, they'll meet both our vows." Outside, the fight slowed, gunsmoke curling into the sky. The desert quieted, waiting. Jonah Pike's voice rang out, mocking, clear. "You can't guard her forever, Boone. One vow against 100 bullets? I'll be here when the last of your words runs dry." The yard echoed with silence again. But it wasn't peace, only the eye of a storm gathering thicker on the horizon. And in that silence, the telegraph key in Otis's hands tapped frantic, desperate. He looked up, eyes wide. "Boone," the wire carried word east. "There's more coming. Not law, not bounty men. Something worse." The widow's lamp flickered low. Boone's vow held, but the desert was summoning a darkness none of them had named yet. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. The desert noon weighed heavy, the heat pressing down like a hand on the back of every neck. The gunfire had ebbed, but smoke still drifted from spent rifles and smouldering boards. The waystation felt less like a refuge and more like a coffin waiting for the lid. Sister Mercy Delaney knelt in the yard, her habit streaked with dust and blood, where a bullet had grazed her arm. Her lips moved in prayer, soft words meant to bind wounds, though the men around her carried only hunger for Boone's head. Boone leaned against the porch beam, pistol hanging at his side. Wren pressed a damp cloth to his brow where a splinter had cut deep, but her eyes kept sliding to the horizon, watching for what Otis Lark's wire had promised. "What's worse than law or bounty men?" she asked quietly. Otis's hands trembled around the telegraph key. The message was short, just one word. Pinkertons. The name alone turned the air colder. Not deputies bound to the territory, not bounty scum like Pike Pinkerton men were something else. Paid law. Hired ghosts. They carried papers sharper than bullets, and didn't stop until their quarry was broken or buried. Boone's jaw tightened. "If they're riding, it means the banks want me more than the territory does." Wren's voice was low but steady. "Then they'll come for your life like it's ledger debt." Out by the arroyo, Redbird 2 Moons returned, his breath sharp. "Riders north, 30, maybe more, black coats, rifles ready." Jonah Pike laughed from the shadows of his horse. "Well, Boone, seems you've won yourself a whole army. When they're done, there won't be enough left of you to fit on a wanted poster." Deputy Yarrow, his sleeve still dark with blood, lifted his cross with shaking fingers. "The Lord's justice comes in many uniforms." His voice cracked, but his eyes still burned. Boone spat in the dust. "Pinkerton justice is bought with silver, not scripture." The first glint of black coats crested the ridge. Their line moved tight, no wasted motion, rifles glimmering under the Sunday. They didn't yell, didn't posture. They rode like the desert already belonged to them. Wren gripped Boone's arm. "You swore to protect me, but no man can stand against that." Boone turned to her, the scar at his mouth drawing hard. A vow isn't measured by numbers. It's measured by the ground I choose to die on. She flinched at the word, but her hand never left his sleeve. Then you'll not die alone. The Pinkertons reined up within shouting distance, dust rising behind them like a wall. Their leader, tall and lean, unrolled a paper and read in a voice cold as iron. By order of the Union Pacific and the First Territorial Bank, Malachi Boone is to be taken alive. Any who harbor him are guilty of conspiracy and will be punished to the fullest extent. His eyes scanned the yard, landing on Wren, then Mercy, then the broken telegrapher inside. Step aside, deliver the outlaw, or burn with him. The words fell heavy as stones. Jonah Pike leaned from his saddle, grinning. Hear that, widow? The law may sermonize, but money don't bargain. They'll burn your house just to prove they can. Boone stepped forward, pistol raised, voice ringing in the dead heat. I gave my word. This widow's roof won't fall while I stand under it. The Pinkerton leader's lip curled, unimpressed. He folded the warrant and tucked it back into his coat. Then you've chosen the long road, Boone, and we've got all the daylight in the world. The line of rifles lifted as one. The desert went silent, waiting, and Sister Mercy's voice broke the stillness, ragged but unyielding. If you fire on this house, you fire on me, and heaven will count each bullet. The Pinkertons didn't lower their guns. The first shot cracked like thunder, no one knew from which side, and the yard exploded into chaos once more. The yard had become a litany of smoke and kicked-up dust, each breath tasting of iron and old promises. When the first volley cut the heat, Wren thought the waystation might finally break timbers, splitting like the age between vows. But it held, stubborn as a prayer, and within its crooked walls men and women moved like a congregation bent on survival. Boone stood at the center, pistol barked and reloaded, every motion economical as a man who'd had to make his choices twice. He moved like someone who knew the weight of every life he might lose. Wren's steady hands, Sister Mercy's shaky prayers, Redbird's taut arrow, arm, even Otis Lark framed by the telegraph key, and a wild, terrified look carried the fragile thread of all of them. The Pinkerton leader's men pushed forward in a tight wedge, black coats like a stain across the horizon. Their rifles coughed in rhythm. Their discipline was the kind money bought. Boone answered, carving arcs of smoke where men had been, feeling each echo as if the desert itself marked a tally. At the fence, Jonah Pike's grin had cracked into a snarl. He rode with a reckless hunger now, cut to the bone by the smell of legal gold. A bullet sang past Boone's ear. He pivoted and returned fire, feeling the sting of another man's fate in the recoil. Inside, Wren moved like a quiet storm, handing shells, tying tourniquets, wiping blood with hands that refused to tremble. Mercy's hymn, soft and defiant, ran under the chaos, a thread that pulled at the edges of fear. Redbird danced between cover and shot, arrows singing with answers Boone's gun could not give. Otis's fingers flew at the telegraph key, a tapping that had become frantic and deliberate. He tapped not the words of surrender, but a string of calls, desperate, repeated, a pattern like a prayer. Send help, Camp Hollow. The dots and dashes stumbled across the wire, a raw litany shot down copper like a flare. Boone saw the flash first, a ragged green banner cresting the ridge, and with it the sound of wheels that did not belong to horses. A wagon, heavy and lumbering, rolled into sight, dust pluming like smoke from a slow-burning fuse. Behind it, smaller figures hopped off and ran, nails in their hands, faces set like men who'd wagered everything to stand on the right side of this fight. For a moment, Boone let himself believe. Then the wagon's driver lifted his head, and Boone saw the man's uniform, the railroad colors, the brass of a foreman's badge. The Union Pacific? Not the Pinkertons' hired law, but the company men who'd sent the Pinkertons in the first place. The foreman tipped a pistol up, not in salute, but in calculation. The leader of the black coats spat and barked orders. Encircle, burn if they hold. His voice was flat and sure, the voice of someone who'd been paid to finish things without argument. Boone felt Wren's hand on his sleeve. fingers like anchor. "They'll keep coming," she said. "No end if the world's bought." Her eyes held something like a question, one he had no promise to answer. On the porch, Mercy suddenly rose, face set. She lifted her robe and the sun found a smudge of red at her sleeve where a sliver of lead had nicked her. "If they fire on this house again," she said, voice thin and fierce, "they fire on the sanctuary I hold. I will walk into that fire if it saves one soul." The Pinkerton leader's smile was small and merciless. "You offer martyrdom, sister. We'll take it as leverage." He signaled, and one of his men pulled forward a coil of something that gleamed like rope but smelled of petroleum. Gasoline. The threat crystallized. Burn to the ground and leave the desert no witness. Jonah Pike laughed. "You're all saints, and saints a straw burn easy." He pushed his horse forward, spurs flashing. Boone stepped between Pike and the house like a man whose ribs had become a gate. "Not tonight," he said, and the words landed like a challenge. The first lantern dipped. A match struck. The smell of kerosene hung, sweet and deadly. Redbird launched an arrow that found a man's wrist. The match slipped and went out with a hiss. A Pinkerton swore, slammed a rifle butt into the dirt, and advanced. Otis hammered the telegraph key until his fingers bled. He tapped a different rhythm, short and desperate. Boone hadn't known it was possible to hear hope on a wire, but the signal went out in a flurry and then again, stronger. Someone had answered. The reply, brief, clipped, dashed across the copper. Heard hold train 1 hour engines slow. Bridge. Hollow. The wire sang back, each syllable a promise cut out of brass. Boone's heart beat a quick, dangerous cadence. 1 hour. Enough time to hold, maybe enough time to bleed. He felt the desert's patience thinning into a thread, one last breath between them, and whatever rescue the rail might bring. The Pinkertons surged. Jonah Pike found a splinter of wood and swung. Mercy fell back, a cry torn from her throat. Wren pushed Boone, a shell casement clinking into his palm. Redbird's arrows worked like so many prayers. One found the hand of a man reaching for fire, another shattered a lantern. Otis ducked his head and tapped with a fury that made Boone think of a man hammering a secret into a coffin. The world reduced to a line of sights and the ache of waiting. Then, as the Pinkertons reloaded and circled like hawks, a far-off sound rolled across the desert, low and mechanical at first, like a beast waking. A whistle answered in the distance, thin at first, then swelling, a sound at once promise and peril. Men looked up. The rails hummed under the Sunday dust lifted from the valley, and on that rising wind came the unmistakable thump of iron on wood wheels answering rails, the train approaching the hollow bridge. For an instant, every man in the yard held the same breath, waiting to see whether the iron of the world would arrive as salvation or as another shape of the law that had come to collect Boone's debt. And then the train's whistle blew again, closer, and someone on the ridge raised a hand to hail it. In the instant between the hail and the engine's roar, Jonah Pike's grin found Boone like a promise kept. He moved toward the porch with a new kind of hunger and the glint of a knife at his belt. Boone reached for him too late. A shot rang inside the way station. Wood splintered. Mercy screamed. Wren's hand flew to her chest where something warm and wrong bloomed beneath a shirt. Outside, the whistle's second, closer note shivered the air. Boone spun toward the sound of the shot and the red that had touched Wren, and the desert answered with a noise that felt like the entire world deciding which of them would live to tell the rest. The engine's shadow crossed the ridge fast, black and indifferent. The whistle wailed again, closer now, its cry dragging across the desert like a blade on bone. But inside the way station, all Boone could hear was Wren's sharp intake of breath. She staggered, her hand slick with blood, crimson blooming fast through the fabric. "Wren!" Boone caught her before she fell, lowering her against the wall. Her eyes blazed, not with fear, but with fury. "Don't you dare let my vow be the one that breaks," she whispered. His jaw clenched. "You'll not bleed for me." Outside, the Pinkertons pressed forward, rifles barking. Redbird Two Moons loosed arrow after arrow, each one singing a defiance the rifles couldn't silence. Sister Mercy knelt beside Wren, hands trembling as she pressed cloth into the wound. Her prayer was a chant, ragged and raw. "Hold, child, hold." Otis Lark's fingers danced frantically on the telegraph key. Sparks flew as he hammered one final message. "Train hurry hollow. Bridge will not hold." Through the smoke, Boone saw Jonah Pike. The bounty man stood tall in his stirrups, grinning like a devil who'd just tasted heaven. "One vow down, Boone. The widow bleeds, and you can't keep her from the dust." Boone rose, pistol drawn, eyes burning cold. "The only dust you'll taste tonight is your own." He fired. Pike's hat snapped from his head, but the man laughed, the bullet grazing without ending him. "Close, Boone," he jeered. But not close enough. The ground trembled. The train was nearly on them. A black engine roared into sight at the far ridge, smoke pouring skyward, steel wheels clattering like war drums. The Pinkertons turned, some signalling, some preparing to use its iron as cover. Deputy Yarrow, pale from blood loss, raised his cross high, voice cutting through chaos. "The Lord's judgment rides in iron. Boone, your vow ends under that whistle." But Boone stepped forward, shoulders squared, gun in one hand, his other hand pointing at Wren. "No law, no coin, no scripture writes her fate. That vow is mine." The Pinkerton leader barked the order. Men surged with kerosene and firebrands, rushing the porch. Boone met them with steel, Redbird with arrows, the widow's house groaning as bullets tore through its bones. Then the world screamed iron, shrieked as the train hit the hollow bridge. Wood shattered. The ground shook like the desert itself had broken. Cars toppled. Sparks lit the horizon, and black smoke swallowed the sky. Flames rose behind the Pinkertons, cutting off retreat. Men scrambled, some crushed, some running blind. The posse broke apart in panic. Horses screamed. Boone saw it all in a glance, the wreck, the fire, the men scattering. But his eyes locked only on Wren, her breath ragged, blood seeping through Mercy's trembling hands. He dropped to his knees beside her, voice of vow he carved into the dust with every word. "You'll live, Wren. As long as I draw breath, you'll live." Her eyes fluttered, catching his. "Then don't waste it," she whispered. The roof groaned above them, timbers cracked by fire and lead. Redbird shouted, "The house won't hold." Outside, Jonah Pike's voice rose through the smoke, closer now, hungry. "The house falls, the widow dies, and your vow dies with her. Come out, Boone, come meet your promise in the yard." The flames roared. The whistle echoed once more, faint, broken, and Boone knew there was no longer a house to defend, only the woman in his arms and the vow that bound him tighter than chains. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West. The waystation sagged under smoke, its timbers blackening as if the desert itself wished to erase it. Boone cradled Wren against the wall, her breath shallow but fierce, her eyes sharp with the pain she refused to surrender. Sister Mercy's hands pressed cloth into the wound, whispering prayers even as the fire licked at her sleeves. Redbird Two Moons leaned at the window, arrows dwindling to a fistful. "They've scattered," he said, voice tight. "But Pike doesn't scatter. He circles. He waits." Boone's scar pulled, his voice iron. "Then we end it." Wren's hand caught his coat, weak but insistent. "Your vow's not to kill him," she rasped. "It's to keep me breathing." Boone bent low, his forehead near hers. "Keeping you breathing means cutting the rope he's got round your neck." Outside, Jonah Pike's voice rang through the smoke, closer than before, a sing-song mockery. "Boone, the fire's eating faster than your prayers. Come out now, and I'll let her die quick. Stay in, and she'll roast with your pride." Boone's pistol slid into his palm like a truth finally claimed. He handed his second revolver to Wren, closing her fingers around it. "You'll hold this, if only to remind the desert you weren't silent." Her eyes burned. "If you don't come back, I come back. He cut her off and stepped into the yard. The smoke curled thick, hiding the horizon. Men ran like shadows through the haze, some Pinkertons fleeing the wreck, others writhing in the dust. But in the center of the chaos, Jonah Pike stood tall, knife gleaming, grin wide as the wound in the earth behind him. Finally, Pike drawled, "You and me, Boone. No law, no sermons. Just the vow you can't keep." Boone walked toward him, slow, deliberate, gun steady. "You want my blood. You've chased it across rivers, towns, deserts. But all you'll ever find is your own shadow." Pike laughed, lunging. The knife flashed. Boone's pistol cracked. The blade nicked his sleeve, but the bullet tore across Pike's arm, spinning him. Still he came on, mad with hunger, teeth bared. They collided in the dust gun against knife, vow against vengeance. Boone's scar stretched as his jaw locked, Pike's grin painted with blood. The desert itself seemed to hold its breath. Then Redbird's shout, "Boone!" The warning came too late. Pike's blade cut deep across Boone's ribs, hot and burning. Boone answered with steel, the pistol's butt crushing against Pike's jaw, knocking him back. The knife clattered. Boone raised his gun, finger tightening, and froze. Wren stood in the doorway, revolver braced in her weak hands, smoke curling behind her like wings of fire. Her voice rang out, cracked but steady. "No more. This ends." Pike turned, eyes wide, grin gone. For the first time, fear touched him. The shot that followed wasn't Boone's. It was Wren's. Jonah Pike fell into the dust, his shadow breaking first, his body after. The grin died with him, cut short at last. Boone staggered, blood soaking his side, but he kept his eyes on Wren. She swayed, the revolver dropping from her hand, but her face was carved with defiance. "You swore to protect me," she said, her voice breaking. "But I didn't swear to let you carry it alone." The flames roared higher, swallowing the last of the roof. The telegraph wire still hissed faintly with sparks, and far on the horizon, the sound of horses gathered whether friend or foe. The desert had yet to decide. The widow had kept her vow, but the law was not done. The flames turned the sky the color of judgment. The waystation collapsed in on itself, groaning like a wounded beast, sparks leaping into the desert air. Boone stood swaying, blood darkening his side, his pistol heavy as sin. Wren leaned against the doorway, revolver slipped from her hand, eyes glassy but alive. Sister Mercy dragged her toward the fence, coughing hard. "Out, child, before the roof buries you." Redbird lifted Boone's arm over his shoulder, hauling the outlaw toward the open yard. Otis Lark stumbled behind, still clutching the telegraph key like it was scripture. His glasses cracked from the blast. The Pinkertons regrouped beyond the smoke, their black coats ghostly in the red haze. Their leader stepped forward, face grim, voice as flat as the desert floor. "Jonah Pike is dust, but Boone still breathes. Deliver him, or you all burn with him." Boone straightened, pulling from Redbird's grip. His scar tugged as he raised his gun once more. "You want me? Here I stand." Deputy Silas Yarrow limped from the shadows, his wounded arm bound tight, the silver cross still glinting on his chest. His eyes burned with fire brighter than the wreckage. "Boone!" he called. "Your vow ends now. You've tied the widow to your sins. That rope snaps tonight." Boone's voice cut through the crackle of fire. "No rope snaps unless I let it." Yarrow lifted his revolver, his men raising theirs in unison. Mercy stepped between them, arms spread, habit glowing orange in the firelight. "If you fire through me," she said, her voice hoarse but unshaken. The Pinkerton leader hesitated. "Step aside, sister. This is not your quarrel." Her eyes blazed. "Every quarrel that touches blood is mine." For a moment, the desert held its breath. Then Otis's telegraph sparked again, a faint tapping, almost drowned in the roar. He raised his broken glasses, reading through the smoke. "Message. Coming through." His voice cracked, desperate. Reinforcements inbound. Hold the hollow. Help rides dawn. The words cut like water through thirst. Redbird's eyes narrowed. Dawn is hours away. We'll not live to see it unless we move. Wren, pale but standing, leaned into Boone's side. Then we move. Now. The Pinkertons tightened their circle. Yarrow stepped forward, his revolver gleaming in firelight, his voice calm and deadly. Boone, I'll carve your vow into the dust myself. Boone raised his pistol, his scar twisted as he answered, voice low, final. Then meet me in it. The yard braced. The fire roared higher, the smoke choking. The desert itself seemed to crouch, waiting for blood to write its next scripture. And as dawn threatened the far horizon, Boone and Yarrow faced each other, cross and vow, law and outlaw, ready to decide which would break first. The horizon hinted at grey before the sun could commit. The wrecked cars behind Boone still smouldered, embers drifting like small, furious stars. Men moved through the haze, some crawling, some running, some already dead to the world. The yard had become a ledger of decisions: who'd shot, who'd bled, who'd kept a vow. Boone felt each number like a stone in his coat. His side burned where Pike's blade had cut him, but the pain was a map now. Every ache pointed to Wren. She sat propped against a broken post, Sister Mercy's shawl around her shoulders, breathing shallow but breathing. Otis Lark pressed his cracked glasses against his face and tapped his telegraph key with hands that trembled from something other than fever, something like faith. Redbird knelt at the fence, bow empty, eyes fixed on the rails where iron would soon decide more than any jury. Deputy Silas Yarrow limped forward through the ash and dust, his wounded sleeve still dark. The silver cross at his chest caught what little light the dawn offered and threw it back like a challenge. Behind him, the remnants of the Pinkertons and the company men gathered in small, watchful groups. Some were broken by the crash, some hungered still for the finish. "You could hand yourself to me," Yarrow said at last, voice even as carved weather. "No more blood than there already is. Turn yourself in, Boone. Let the territory judge you." Boone laughed, no joy in it, only iron. "Judge me? You'd have them pick verses from the ledgers and call that justice. No, my vow's due to a woman who chose me the same hour she chose to live." Wren's eyes met his, and in that look was a history of small kindnesses. "You saved me," she rasped, voice rough. "Now go save yourself and the rest of us." He shook his head. "Promises don't split in two. If I walk out with my hands up, they take me and leave the house to dust. If I stay, they burn what's left. Neither is a bargain." Yarrow's jaw tightened. "Then we settle it the only way the desert understands." Across the broken yard, the sound of wheels, distant at first, then nearer, cut the morning. Otis's tapping quickened into a staccato of hope. Redbird stood, eyes scanning the rim where the hollow bridge swallowed steel. Men on the ridge shouted, figures approaching, uniforms unfamiliar until they stepped into the thin light. A detachment from the territorial court, riders with papers, a judge's seal stitched into a leather satchel. Relief, bright as a blade, flickered through Boone for one breath. But behind those riders, smaller shapes moved, figures not uniformed, faces shadowed, purposeful. They weren't coming to lay down law. They were coming for balance. The desert always collected one debt or another, and today its patience had thinned to a string. The court riders called out, papers held high. "By order of the territory, cease hostilities. Take prisoner Malachi Boone alive." Their voice carried the legalese Boone had heard all his life, the hollow echo of bureaucracy chasing down names. Yarrow's hand curled around his revolver. "Then take him. Let the law have his throat." His eyes flicked to Wren, and something like regret or perhaps merely calculation crossed his face. Boone stepped into the open, sun catching the wet sheen at his side. He held his hands out slowly, palms up, like a man showing the weight of his choices. Behind him, Wren rose on unsteady legs and walked, to stand in the middle of the yard between him and the riders, skin pale, eyes fierce. "If you take him," she said, addressing the riders and Yarrow both, You take the witness to my loss. You take every night I kept the light. You take the promise of a woman who chose a man to guard her and will not be guarded into silence. The judge's rider dismounted, leather creaking. He squinted through the smoke, appraising the scene like a man reading a contract. This court recognizes the territory's writ. Malachi Boone, by all accounts, is to be brought in. But I am also judge and witness. I will see fair trial before any sentence. The law will not be a lynch mob's shadow today. Jonah Pike's ghost seemed to hang in the dust like a taunt. He was dead by Wren's bullet, and yet what he'd chased, the hunger for finality, still breathed through the men who would profit from Boone's capture. The Pinkerton leader spat, furious at the prospect of a legal delay. "We were hired to take him. We'll take him by force if you prefer your law slow," he snarled. Boone's breath came ragged. He let his hands fall into his pockets, feeling the old scars that had stitched his life. "If you handcuff me," he said quietly, "I won't curse you. I'll tell the truth. I'll name what was done and what was owed. But you'll not carry off the widow on your ledger of victories." His voice hardened. "Promise me that the woman in this yard keeps her name." The judge regarded Wren, then Boone, then the blurring line of men waiting for either armor or blood. In that moment, the desert held its breath, the law, the vow, the woman who had bought a protection with her courage. The judge folded the papers, voice low and final. "The court will take Malachi Boone alive. The territory orders preservation of life where possible. Widow Calder, your name and safety will be recorded and protected in the court's papers. Any man who harms you will answer in full." A murmur ran through the assembled men. Some cheered, others spat and turned away. Deputy Yarrow lowered his gun with a slow, reluctant motion, shoulder aching but resolve unbroken. The Pinkerton leader cursed into his scarf but backed his men away. Boone closed his eyes for a moment and exhaled like a man setting down a heavy pack. The wound at his ribs burned, but the ache of a vow honored radiated deeper. He took one step toward the riders, then stopped. Wren's hand found his and squeezed a final small tether. "Live," she breathed. "Live to get old and make houses into homes, not graves." He nodded. "I'll see you again." The words were a promise and not a prophecy. Hands went into cuffs, papers were read, and men who'd come to burn left with their hunger dulling under official sanction. The desert settled around the waystation, like dust on a book pages, scorched but legible. The judge's rider mounted, and the legal procession prepared to take Boone to trial, to paper and testimony, and the slow machinery of justice. As they led him away, Boone glanced back. Wren stood on the porch where the roof had once been, Sister Mercy at her side, Redbird watching the arroyo, Otis clutching the telegraph like a relic. The sun finally broke free of the rim, slicing the yard in gold. For a moment, the light found Boone's face and softened the hard line of his scar. He lifted his head, and to himself as much as to her, spoke the vow again, less like a threat now, more like a prayer. "I protected you until the law came hunting. I kept that promise." Wren lifted her chin, eyes bright with something like triumph and loss woven together. "You kept it," she said. "Now go keep the rest." The judge rode off with his papers, the court following, the law grinding slowly but inexorably into the day. Boone walked between two men whose hands would carry his fate, each step leaving a print in the ash. He didn't look back when the waystation became a smudge behind him, only forward, where trials waited and where, perhaps, at some distance of sun and months, he would return. The desert exhaled. The rails hummed. Somewhere a train carried smoke toward a horizon that rarely forgave, but sometimes, if you kept your vows, remembered. If you enjoy this story, don't forget to like, share, comment, and subscribe for more tales from the Wild West.